When Buggy announced that the Cross Guild would be going after the One Piece, it really started to get me thinking, who will ultimately be the person that Oda decides to have claim the One Piece? And there are quite a few candidates for this, more than even most people realize. I mean, Luffy is obviously our first candidate for this for a lot of reasons, but red-haired Shanks has thrown his hat in the ring as well. And as for people who watch the anime only, they're not even fully aware yet of the fact that both the Marines and the Revolutionary Army both have decided to go after the One Piece for their own reasons as well. Now look, I'm not here to tell you that the group with basically what amounts to P.T. Barnum as their leader, or the group of a guy who we waited better part of 22 years to take action, who's going to be the ones that actually claim the One Piece. But what I am saying is that Oda is a writer who never does anything without a reason, and there is actually a hidden code in all of these people declaring that they will be the ones to claim it. I mean, why wouldn't they? The One Piece is the final destination of the series. It is one of the things that when Oda said originally it was claimed, it would end the series. Though to be perfectly honest, at this point, I don't exactly think that's what's going to happen, but it was the original intention. But as the One Piece developed from being simple treasures that were left behind by the world's greatest pirate to possibly being something else entirely, it seems likely that it has a greater role within the story. So who do we know is currently looking for it, and who do we think Luffy and crew are going to have to beat out in order to actually claim it? Because yes, obviously Luffy and crew are technically the first people we're counting on this list as looking for it. And if we're being very, very honest, they have probably one of the best chances to find it due to their crew's composition, having some of the best navigators, historians, and otherwise ship sailors in the world, as well as having an interesting mix of both devil fruit and non-devil fruit users, and that's actually going to be important for a later part of this video. We are also aware that the person that Luffy wants to meet the most is also looking for it in the form of red-haired Shanks, and he's actually been one of the more prominent people to declare with in recent times. The more interesting thing about Shanks saying that he wants to find the One Piece is less that he wants to find it and more that he's waited so long, nearly 2 full decades going on free, to be honest. There were clearly other aspects of his plan that he needed to initiate and get into the works first, and it's interesting now though that Luffy is an emperor with an unlocked Nika fruit that he decides now is the time. His crew might also have the second best composition for getting here because there are no devil fruit users on the crew, and that might actually be a contributory reason why they are the greatest threat for this. And of course, if anybody's really going to try and stick it to the red-haired pirates in the finding of the One Piece, it's probably going to be the Cross Guild. And if we look from an outside perspective of the Cross Guild in the One Piece world, there's some substantial bulk behind it. Keep in mind that while Buggy may very well be a joke whose balls blow up more than he does, Crocodile and Mihawk are actually serious threats that should always be considered whenever anybody talks about the Cross Guild. Honestly, the fact alone that Mihawk has fought Shanks to a standstill before is more than enough of an indication to dictate how strong this particular grouping is. Plus, they might very well be the best financed group on this list, given that the Cross Guild has the most amount of money, I think, of anybody here. And to be blatantly honest, the only person who might be able to legitimately give them a run for that is actually the Navy, but of course, the people who are going to be going after the One Piece aren't the Navy proper. For one thing, I think if that had been a priority for the Navy at any point in time, they would have definitely taken more initiative to do that before now. And with the Siege of Marijois, there's just no way they can possibly devote the resources necessary to go look for it. That does mean that more than likely Sword is going to be the ones that are going to take the particular initiative on this, and to some degree that makes sense. Particularly because in this instance, Kobe has really started to step up into the leadership position of that particular organization, and he says that he has to keep Luffy from achieving his dream because of the threat the One Piece potentially holds. Now look, far be it from me to judge the fact that the literal One Piece embodiment of Peabody and Sherman, and yes, I'm guaranteeing you that's what that joke is, are not capable of finding the One Piece. It just seems extraordinarily interesting that he's had no real interest in it up to this point, but now he's been thrust into the position that he's going to have to go look for it. But of course, if there was a direct counterpart to Kobe and Sword, that is undoubtedly the Revolutionary Army, in particular the small squad operated by the Flame Emperor himself. And look, if there's anybody on this list who has expressed an interest in the One Piece less than Kobe, it's actually probably Sabo. That basically always having been left is part of Luffy's overall dream, and while he supports him in that, he doesn't really have any particular interest to stop it, but now, much like Kobe, he has a reason to. With Vegapunk basically pointing to the fact that the One Piece holds great access to power and weapons that might very well tip the scales of battle, the Revolutionary Army probably can't afford to ignore it. So in the case of this, it's more like the Revolutionary Army, much like the Navy, doesn't have an interest in obtaining the One Piece for themselves, it's just about keeping it away from everybody else. But that really leaves you with the question. This basically means the Navy, the Revolutionary Army, and 3 major pirate factions are basically going after the One Piece. And before you ask, yes, technically Blackbeard has expressed an interest in it, but honestly all the moves he's been making have been pointing less to One Piece and more to Marijois. And for a couple reasons, that'll probably be where he will actually strike and what difference that will make, so that's really a different conversation altogether. So who out of these major factions are going to be the ones to actually find the One Piece? And the answer is all of them. All of them are going to find the One Piece. And look, on the face of it, I understand why that sounds crazy, because normally when we talk about the One Piece, it's whoever gets there first is the winner and everybody else isn't going to matter. But based on some of the hints that Oda has started to drop throughout the series, it's more apparent that the One Piece Piece is less treasure or even a weapon itself, so much as more than likely a library. And let's be honest, as much as Oda has always loved drawing various types of treasure and beautiful people, it's quite clear that he's a massive book nerd. And in that way, it makes total sense that the absolute mangaka of geekdom would make the final treasure of his series a basic library that would probably tell you the entire history of the world. And with bearing that in mind, it's also important to remember that while the One Piece is undoubtedly a library, an informative read isn't necessarily a pleasant one, and I actually think the history of the One Piece world is going to be depressing, if nothing else. My reasoning and logic behind this is quite simple. The fact that when Roger found it, all he could do is laugh is an indication to me that this isn't really supposed to be funny, it's probably actually horrendous. The history of the One Piece world undoubtedly being marked by the constant oppression and shifting power tides of different eras all the way throughout its entire history. And yet, rather than become overwhelmed by the simple fact that Roger Pirates instead decided to take it in stride and decide that there was a possibility for a future. A fact of thinking that is only confirmed by Rayleigh, who basically point blank says to Robin that their journey will shape how they view the One Piece, indicating to me that the One Piece is really a subjective piece of material that is undoubtedly strong information, and who you are will very much affect how you interpret it. So let's be clear about something else. When we look at this group of who's going to find it and what they will uncover, it is going to break most of them. For one thing, I think Sabo and Kobe are going to have the biggest reaction to this. Kobe's going to have an entire, basically, early life crisis around the fact that the world government is essentially as bad as it gets. Probably coupled with the fact that its original founding was predicated on actually betraying Joy Boy, and Joy Boy might actually have been a reformer before he was a pirate based on some of the things that we've seen. And I think for Sabo, this is going to have just as bad an effect, because basically what it means is that no attempt at rebellion has ever really been successful, and the powers that be are going to be so crushing on the Revolutionary Army, particularly in regards to whatever weapon Emu actually has access to, plus ones that we probably don't even know about yet. And of course, Buggy will basically just be sobbing over in the corner of the fact that there's actually no gold there, so that will at least be funny. With the possibly not indistinct possibility that Crocodile might be trying to beat the crap out of him for dragging him on this journey and into this fight. But the one person who may or may not be affected by this is Red-Haired Shanks, as I actually believe he might have an idea of what the One Piece is, and that's why it was the later part of his plan. Deciding instead to invest in the future with somebody else and basically make it possible for the world to have a new chance. And yes, do I think this means that it'll be Luffy who will have the best reaction to the One Piece? Basically probably having Rogers, in terms of, I haven't tried it, so why would I not think that it's going to work? And I think that'll be a very important factor. Plus, I also happen to believe this will be the reason that these particular factions will all end up together by the end of the series. And I mean, even if we look at things like the mural on Elbaf, there's a strong correlation for why these things will probably end up together. Oh, and if you're wondering why I keep saying that the crew compositions are important, that's because as far as we are aware, it's entirely possible that One Piece is guarded by something that basically makes it impossible to be approached by Devil Fruit users, at least normal. If the theory is stated to be correct, Buggy got sick originally because he was the only person on the Roger Pirates of the Devil Fruit. That means that a good portion of the Straw Hats, the Cross Guild, and others are all going to get sick. This means that it'll be up to the crew members who basically don't have Devil Fruits to navigate and get their ships to the location. Now, do I believe that this will either be a device that has to be deactivated, or more likely the effect stops when you're actually on the island? Like I said, I highly doubt that Luffy's going to be incapacitated for all of this, and that probably goes for all of the other characters as well. But whether that is just getting there or shutting something off is going to be a key aspect of this.
Huh?